just my phone just froze up. So you guys can go. You can continue. Industry. As I said, he's the CEO of NXT Robotics, which builds a cognitive security robotics platform. In 2013, Darin founded CyberTech, CyberHive, and iHive Incubators, a global cybersecurity and IoT network ecosystem providing cybersecurity and IoT resources, strategic programs, and quality thought leader IoT forums across the nation. Before that, he was the CEO of Cyber United, an enterprise cybersecurity firm. He also served as the president of North America at Norman Shark, a forensic malware analytics company acquired by Symantec. Prior to Norman Shark, Darin was the chief operating officer at ESET, and we all know who ESET is. And he created the security, while he was the COO at ESET, he created the Security RE City Initiative. The initiative now is an independent foundation. It was recognized by the White House as the best local community plan DHS National Cybersecurity Awareness Challenge. Darin is a distinguished, he's Poneman Institute Fellow and received an MBA in Finance and Operations Management and second master's in Information Systems Operations. So he is going to facilitate this fireside chat today. And again, I'm going to let him. He has John Turner, who is the Senior Vice President over at Accenture and the CEO of GAFCON Digital, with Eric Chris, who's the CEO of CustoMATRIX, and Darin will do a little more chatting about them. So today they're going to speak on powering the AI revolution, infrastructure security, and the data of center era. So everyone, let's welcome Darin and John and Eric.
I'm going to start from here. Is that okay? Here? Okay. Hey, I'm Darin Andersen. I want to first of all welcome everybody here to the event, and it's been some excellent material and content shared so far. We're going to try to continue that in that vein, and we're going to switch it up a little bit by doing a fireside chat, and what that'll entail is us hitting on a few trends and topics, maybe some that you're familiar with, maybe a couple that are kind of out on the prairie a little bit, to kind of expose you to what's coming. And I want to just also welcome our online audience. We do have about 200 folks that are joining us virtually, but it's great that we're here, and we're going to take advantage of the fact that we're here in this forum. with the Fireside chat. So the format will look something like, I'll introduce myself. Kim, thank you for the warm introduction. Thank you, FutureCon, for putting on a great event. Big round of applause. I'll do a quick intro of Eric and John. I'll let them say a little bit about themselves. And then we'll open up a discussion. And the discussion isn't just the three of us. It includes everybody in the room because you're all expert in something. And we want your input so that you can sort of share with one another and also with us, because we'd like to walk away with some value just like you came to walk away with value. And to orchestrate this, we've got our man Angelo. Angelo, raise your hand. Angelo's going to walk around with the mic and make sure that you just take a second, wait for that mic. Even though we could probably hear you in the room, we'll want Angelo to bring you a mic. The main reason is we want our online followers to hear us and also for everything to get picked up in the audio and the video. Okay, so there's a practical reason for it. Quick survey. How would you identify yourself in your business life? Who here sees themselves as primarily technical in your background and what you do? Okay, understood, and define that as you will. Business, more of a business focus. Okay. Changing up topics a little bit, who has heard of the concept of digital twin? Mm-hmm. Good. We're going to talk a little bit about that today, so be prepared for that. We'll explain what that is and share some insights. So as we stroll into 2025, already halfway through, we're seeing a lot of what we've seen over the last couple of years, compounded by this phenomenon of artificial intelligence, which I won't go on too much. I think we'll talk about that in the context of our comments and the Fireside chat. But I would say, it's kind of business as usual. Malware still number one threat that we're concerned about. At least that's where we're spending most of our time, is trying to prevent that. Same foreign actors as we've seen in the past. But what is changing, and the focus of our remarks and interaction today will be the AI revolution that has a lot of consequences on how we build and operate data centers, which of course are the backbone of how we operate in the world and on behalf of our customers. And also what we see is required for those, both from a cybersecurity standpoint, how the AI model will impact that. So that's what we're going to get started on. So I will sit down now. And remember, Angelo has the hot mic. And let's say in a couple minutes after I make an introduction, we'll start on a topic or two, and then we'll open it up for everybody else. All right, so let me first have the guys introduce themselves. I'll start with John. John, can you share a little bit about your background, a minute or two, and then Eric will have you introduce.
Okay, thanks, Darin. So confession to start off with, I am not a cybersecurity professional, but I interface a great deal with cybersecurity professionals in what I do, which is twofold. First of all, helping the hyperscalers to build out the data centers for AI. And part of that is to evolve what we call a digital thread, linking together everything from planning to design to construction to commissioning to operations, and then into the digital twin environments. So this introduces some real issues because previously we could keep our threats fairly well contained. But now we're trying to share this data across the entire organization. We're starting to get some very real issues of how do we allow people to communicate and collaborate in a secure manner. So two perspectives, just to summarize. One is actually building out the infrastructure. Second is actually using it to make sure that we can build these data centers and other infrastructure a lot more efficiently with AI than without it.
Thanks, John. Eric?
Good to be with you.
Can you hear him?
Can you hear me? Well,
Now you can. Yep.
good to be with you here today. I'm Eric Chris, and I started CustoMATRIX, which is an executive consulting firm, about 20 years ago, and have gotten to the point where today we're working with the integration with, as John just mentioned, digital twin technology together with robotics And finally, I guess the third leg to that stool is RFID. So there's a lot going on right now in that particular space that lends itself well to any organization to at least to discuss and consider the benefits. The costs may outweigh it, but I think because of the rapid advancement in implementing those technologies, maybe we can talk about that a little bit further today.
Great. So I'm going to have John in just a moment share a little bit more about the digital twin concept, because it actually turns out that it's been amongst us, around us for a long time. And with the advent of artificial intelligence, which if you look back is really learning models and going back really 50 years of looking at the way that we use data in a more concise way to actually make predictive predictions about the future and what we see and what we work in. That's the world that we're living in now. And I think the convergence that we've seen over the last 5 to 10 years in various areas over that period is what has brought us to the state, because we were talking about the model of using big data. Does anybody remember that term? It's not something you hear a lot about, but if you think about it, it's the thing that's underlying this revolution that we now call AI that's been amongst us for the last 12 to 24 months, but really like go back 4 decades to when we started down this path. And you can see even 10 years ago that when we were training what we now call the AI model, it was really training a database in a way that was presenting to us an infant brain, not a adult, human, mature brain. And so just in this, I think the last 10 years is when we've seen major advancement. And that's because we have big data, which is underlying, and the ability to compute that big data in a way that's unprecedented. What I call ubiquitous connectivity. Everything's connected to everything. Inside of that same decade, we've had the advent of the Internet of Things. So not only where we started as security professionals when we were securing initially that server box in the closet, which became all the laptops connected to that server box in the closet, connected to the outsourcing of all that into a data center. And then if you remember that era where everyone decided they were going to bring some kind of phone to work, I know that that seems like a distant thing for some, but it's not that far past. So we were bringing those digital devices in. And those naughty executives that had to bring the iPhone in, which was impossible to manage. So we see in this a maturation of technologies, probably a half a dozen major technologies that have coalesced into where we're at today. And this is what we're talking about now is artificial intelligence. And from this, we create this new space of being able to digitally represent almost anything that we can represent in the physical world. And that's the digital twin. And John, I'm going to have you share a little bit more about the digital twin concept.
Yeah.
Great intro.
So the digital twin is a very interesting concept because it started off by just saying, let's just mirror the physical world in the virtual world. But it's not just the physical thing, it's actually the processes also that create that physical thing. So you can put a lot of data, a lot of different disciplines back into this world of digital twins. But digital twin is really about 3 steps in my perspective. The first is we have to teach people to communicate. We have to give them a common language of communication, and that language is data. And so that data has to flow across lots of different people, doing lots of different things in lots of different systems. That allows the people to start to collaborate in a way that they've never collaborated before. But that also starts to introduce changes in the business environment because people are normally very nervous about sharing their data, sharing what they do, in case people start pointing out they're not doing them correctly. So we've got to get the trust in terms of that collaboration. And then we get to the real benefit of a digital twin, which is being able to correlate that data and start to see patterns in that data that we've never seen before. We did a project, and I was just talking to these two previously, a project recently where we started to look at data which is being created within a building project. construction project. So it's issues data, problems which have been created by the architects and engineers that were then having to be solved by the general contractor in construction. And as we started to look at that data, we started to get some very nonsensical results back from a conventional AI approach. So the probabilistic model of AI was not working. So we started to train the AI agent to interpret the data, basically put guardrails around the data. We started to get some much better answers back, but they still weren't correlating with the answers that we got back from structured data queries. Then we started to do some deep training and started to use inference within the data. And my technical people said, we've actually cleaned up the data. We're actually getting some really sensible answers back from the AI agent now. I said, no, you've not cleaned up the data. You're teaching the agent to interpret the data in the same way that people would interpret the data as long as they had the right expertise. So a lot of people think that AI is magic. It's not. If you use AI out the box, it's going to produce a lot of hallucinations, it's going to produce a lot of garbage, and if you start using it, you're going to be in deep trouble. So I think that a lot of our clients initially said, let's start to use AI and we can de-skill our people. We're coming up with a complete different answer now. We're saying, let's make our people far more skillful and be able to interpret the data and be able to enlarge the data that they can interpret such that they can be far more useful and far more productive. So lessons learned is AI out the box doesn't really work. But as long as you have an agentic approach to AI, you can start to get some very, very big benefits.
So AI, in my view, is exactly the conversation that we should be having and that we're going to have today. But it's all based on the thing that we are in need to protect. It's what our jobs are, and that's to protect the data, right? And so the connection between what we do in protecting the data and securing that from these new technologies that are coming down the pipe being used in an unprecedented way is critical to our craft, that we learn to evolve our skill sets around this very, I think, dramatically changing environment. If you look at the data center of today and compare it to what is being constructed as we sit here today, it's a completely changed model. Moving from the hyperscale movement of very large organizations like Meta and Google and Microsoft, they've been building those large facilities for the last 10 years. But what is radically different now is the concept of creating a data center next to an AI facility and pairing those things together. And all the holes and gaps in that we are going to have to address as cybersecurity experts is going to be critical to making this success. But at the end, it starts with the data. So that's what we want to share. Eric, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, John, you helped me and pointed out a practical thought around digital twin. And while a few of you raised your hands on the question of do you know about digital twin technology, I think everybody in this room has experienced Uber. So for me, Uber is the best example of digital twin technology and a great springboard to use to think of how it might be applied in larger, more complex topographies or landscapes. So you have the Google vehicle, which is, on your app, you can track, which was always, fascinating for me, where I'm watching the, Bill and, in his Uber vehicle approach me, and he's 2 minutes away, he's 1 minute away. So you have this imposed or superimposed on a huge GPS grid, which is what tracks the vehicle and makes you aware with additional features in the software that are being tapped through AI that make the experience more efficient for you. Well, it's very much the same in a large-scale adaptation of digital twin technology, where you have a business, in particular a manufacturing business, where you have all of these particular areas of interest: logistics, raw materials, work in process, finished goods, and movement with vehicles like forklifts and people. And digital twin captures that world the same way that Uber captures the movement of a vehicle. So if you can picture how well that's worked to be able to efficiently drive this transportation colossus that many of us now depend on, it's not that far of a leap to think about how that same analysis and simulation could be adapted to obviously the bigger businesses first, but I don't think it's going to be long before this simulated reality using digital twin coupling will be able to be applied to smaller and smaller businesses. And eventually to us, I mean, how many of us pictured using Waze to figure out how to get to the FutureCon event up in Orange County? It's not that long before we'll be considering digital twin technology for ourselves. And to that point, there exists with one of the firms that we're working with a do-it-yourself digital twin feature, which allows you to create a digital twin. I won't get into the ethical issues and the privacy issues of it, because there's plenty of room for discussion about that and the invasion of privacy. But I think taken one step at a time, this overarching idea of integrating AI with a digital twin platform, which includes, in our case, in our implementations, robotics and RFID, it's really an exciting, it's kind of where we're headed. When they said, when Darin talks about integrating AI, it's where we're headed. So it's pretty exciting.
So, quick survey of the room. Who in this room feels like they have perfect privacy? Who in this room thinks they have any privacy? Right, so that cat is already out of the cage. And I think what we see now is companies, especially enterprise, especially in manufacturing, looking to simulate their environments to reduce cost and create efficiency. And that is the good side and one of the positive attributes that AI in a general way is bringing. So if you look at the factory of the future, which is starting to happen now, you see a physical space with all sorts of materials for supply, and then there's some process by which you make the widget. You put the materials in and turn the handle, and out the other end comes the completed item. And as we move through that experience of the factory, we see all these areas where having the opportunity to simulate that to project what it could look like. And the key point here in my mind is that this becomes the critical part of what we're going to need to protect going into the future. So to see this simulated digital environment come down the pipe, which is going to be paired next to the physical environment that we've been working to focus and securing, is going to be critical. So pause, and anyone have a burning question that they'd like to share to get us going on our discussion? We've got Angela back here with the mic.
Any questions? No bad questions.
Can I maybe pick up with a question for the audience then? And so we've spoken about digital twin as going from physical to virtual, but digital twins can also go from virtual back to the physical, which is what Darin's introduced with simulation. So how many of you have thought about training people or training any system to use the new technologies which are out there, and the focus on humanoid robots? Because you think everyone in this room is a model for a humanoid robot. That if we can capture what we are doing and then transfer that knowledge to a humanoid robot, then we have the ability to start sharing our expertise and making ourselves a lot more productive. So how do we control what we have in terms of our actions and stop the ether from capturing everything?
Question over here. Can you just say your name and your organization, please?
Yes, my name is Ian. I'm with Torrance Memorial Medical Center. So we've seen within the video game industry, at least over a decade ago, with training models such as video games for the Army, where we have systems that are taking these virtual battlefields and bringing them out into training for real-world application. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you perceive the differences between those kinds of systems and whatever benefits the AI is supposedly providing by moving to this model, going in with that virtual to physical space?
Right.
John? Yeah.
I'll answer that with an actual example. So I was at a meeting at NVIDIA a couple of months ago, and they were telling the client some of the history of developing their training platform. So originally they were putting together a robotics training environment for BMW to move car parts around in the factory. And so they brought the robots and BMW staff over to Santa Clara, and they set up a warehouse with something that looked a little bit like a car factory, and they started to move the robots through and start to train them. And then they suddenly realized this is not working. Why are we doing this in the physical? Why don't we do this in the virtual? And so the big focus of, if you research NVIDIA at the moment, particularly what they're doing with the learning environments, they can run tens or hundreds of thousands of simulations of how people are moving, how robotics are moving, how things ought to be laid out within the virtual environment. Their next move will be to completely isolate that from the visualization of that. At the moment, we still have humans who are looking at the screen and seeing how these robots are moving around. But that's not an efficient way of doing it. Hand it over to an AI agent who's controlling this, and that agent will say if there are any issues, say there's been a spill of material and the robots can't go down aisle B. But that's going to completely change the way that things are being done. And video games the environments have been designed in a pseudo building information management environment for many, many years. Just don't have all the electrical systems and the HVAC systems, but the facades are exactly the same as the systems that architects and engineers use at the moment for physical buildings.
That's what I'd say is the connection that you are pointing at is that we did everything in a virtual world and it was all virtual. And now what we're doing is we're peeling that out and overlaying it on the physical world. And if you think about it, it's the complexity of that that's been taking the time, is the ability to now say, here's this digital environment, which, by the way, we have to create, right? So how do we create the digital environment? We look at the physical environment. So we need modeling tools, 3D, LiDAR. Those things come in and measure a room like this and create a visual picture using something like we call a point cloud or a visual map of everything that's there. So I can see, here's the production line, and there's a Kiva Amazon machine or robot that actually brings in raw materials. And it's that physical attribution that we've been working to get towards. And I think we've now met that standard, at least at a basic level. So that revolution has just started, right? So in order for us to, in a way, be guiding that process and not sort of falling under the bus, if you will, this is why we need to, A, make sure that our cybersecurity and all these things is kept pristine. Because if you look at the shenanigans that the AI is capable of, it's creating guideposts around that and what we call guardrails on the AI. But then we've got the traditional race of different state actors and agents that are trying to predominate and be number one. We assume that because we live in America that our vision of AI is going to be the vision, but that's only if we stay ahead. And I would say you have, at minimal, a two-horse race with a lot of sketchy side actors that may have some impact on that. So imagine that it's the US and China, and you have two different views of how that race is going to end. A recent study done, and I shared some of this at my speech at RSA, is a study that was done by a group of researchers and scientists from OpenAI, Google, Microsoft. They all got together and they said, let's do a real world simulation of how this is going to operate with the AI in place and coming into its own as another element of our societal, cultural, and technical way of being. And what they found is that within 2 years, 2027, that either the AI is in charge and they're making us believe we're in charge, or there's a more dystopian view where carbon life isn't required. And I don't mean that to be alarmist, and I'm an optimist, so I'm pretty sure that at best we're going to think we're in charge, but not be. We have the opportunity, though, to play a bigger part in this, not only from a cultural part, and I think that's largely what it's about, is what is our choice as humans to participate in this next generation? It's somewhere between here and Star Wars and Star Trek, right? It's a kind of amalgamation of those things. And it relates back directly to the video games that many of us have been playing for a long time.
Just want to follow up, Ian, that training series that you mentioned that was based on military, is that something that was a series? Was that a particular, or you're just saying kind of categorically?
It was an actual video game.
It was a video game, okay. Yeah, so to that point, I guess the obvious benefit of combining the AI with actually superimposing it on an actual landscape is the ability to run so many different iterations and create so many more variations in movement. Whatever that training was, you think about the almost infinite range of motion that AI introduces, and its more complete depiction of reality, and hence improvement on training. It's kind of mind-boggling.
Well, and I like the ability to respawn, right? Because if you get killed in the game, and it was Navy SEALs, I know that there was a Navy SEAL version of this that was going around. I'm from Coronado, and there's a lot of Navy SEALs down there, and this training was happening in Camp Pendleton and in Coronado at the base there. And, you know, the ability to respawn, like, and I say respawn for gamers, not to die and be dead, but to have the opportunity to learn and come back and try it again. And in a way, that's the opportunity that the AI gives all of us, right? Is we can be in a gamification relationship to it, not just finding out, oh, we think we're in charge, but we're not. Other questions? Join the conversation with us. Here?
Thank you.
Just your name and your organization, please.
Zach with Turnstone Compliance. A two-part question. For organizations that desire to exploit the capabilities of agentic AI in their organization, but they have understandable concerns about data privacy, data security, data sovereignty, how would you gentlemen recommend addressing a secure implementation that preserves all three of those? Second question is, how considerable are the costs of implementing a faithful digital twin simulation of a business's environment and processes?
Let me do part one, and John and Eric join in on part two. So I would say that it actually starts with human training and human development. So, you know, I'm sure you've all been or know somebody that's been part of an organization where they're like, no AI, right? Can't use ChatGPT here. Like, don't do it. I think that's changed radically even over the last 12 months, right? We went from saying no ChatGPT because we can't control it, mainly like from a selfish corporate point of view, to say, oh crap, my competitor is running out ahead of me. Their employees somehow got smarter and we got to join the race, right? And I think that if you think about it, do we have privacy? No. Why don't we have privacy? Because we're trying to be productive. What is the desire to have productivity over privacy? You're running hard. You're not necessarily maintaining your privacy, which opens us all up to certain threats. So I would say start with human training. I would say have a plan where we say, this is how we get from an AI-enabled environment to where we want to be. And that is integrating that with our technology, which it's already there, right? Like the AI already exists amongst us. It's that annoying call center that we go through. It's that set of processes. And this is where I think we'll see major iterations in AI over the next 12 months is it's going to be all around us. And agentic, which is essentially the AI starting to think for itself, is going to be the thing that we'll see shades of, but not necessarily completely recognize. Third component is technology. A wonderful set of vendors next door in the room. And we've got to be, as we always have in the last 20 years in this cybersecurity business, is looking at the new technologies. I remember the time when we were like almost manually stamping out viruses. At ESET, we turned to automation because we were outgunned and outpersoned by all the stuff that was hitting us. So automation was the only way out there. So in a way, I'd say AI is the only way out. We've got to be prepared for that and leverage the technologies that leverage those technical elements. John, you want to answer part two?
I'd say, well, maybe just a quick answer to part one, which I'll answer in two parts. So I think it depends on the scale of the agentic approach. Because if you can isolate it around an application, you can ring fence it and you can put the necessary security protocols in place. And a lot of clients I work with are very nervous about using AI, which is built into an application that's available in the cloud, in case their competitors get the benefit of the learning. So in general, we're finding most of our clients want to bring in the AI into their own closed environment. That works for an application. It doesn't work for a digital twin because of the digital thread pulling everything together. I know that all you professionals would like a zero risk approach, but there's got to be a business approach around that. And generally, the most difficult task that we have is to bring all of the different parties together in order to get something that works for the business, but it will not work for IT or for cybersecurity because they want zero risk. Business is going to have to accept some risk. It's what risk are they going to accept? The second question is you ask what's the cost, and I'll answer it by saying how long's a piece of string? It's not the cost of a digital twin that you should be looking at. As far as I'm concerned, I'll go in and people say, sell me a digital twin. And I'm saying, no, I don't sell digital twins. I sell solutions to business problems. That solution to business problem has a cost to the business. It has a value that can be that solution will have to the business. So try and change the conversation around from cost to what value is going to be created. You might find a digital twin approach does not create the value. If it's a siloed approach, it probably will not create the value of a siloed solution. And the analogy that I always use is the smartphone. You think of how many people would go out and buy a smartphone, what are they, $1,200 or something, if you didn't have any connectivity with a provider. You couldn't get your email and your texts. You couldn't use GPS. You couldn't use that connectivity to the real world. It wouldn't create any value. But as soon as you have that core functionality in place, then you can start building very cheap applications on top of it. Uber is one of them. But you can build very cheap applications very quickly to leverage the value of that digital twin platform that you have in place to create all sorts of business value.
I think your question too related to a successful implementation of a digital twin. What would the scenario be, wasn't it?
Secure implementation of agentic AI.
Yeah.
The second part of that question was, what are the average costs associated with implementing faithful digital twins of an environment and processes?
Yeah, maybe I'm speaking more to the quality because my background is accounting and finance, and I'm steeped in too much cost. So, but the quality, I think, what to look for or what to consider is the human side of an implementation and establishing how it might impact the organization. And we were talking about it in preparation for this discussion. I compare it to any large scale or any scale software implementation or lean or agile implementation where the success of those projects is driven by the dedication of the consulting or the integrator to the interest of the human beings in that organization. So to the extent that you all consider implementing these, finding somebody who has a rich background in organizational development and awareness of lean types of frameworks, they're the ones, and they kind of gravitate towards digital twin anyway, because it's so comprehensive. But finding that kind of agent, if you will, for this type of implementation, I think is a key component.
Who else has a question for us? Steve?
Hi there, two-part question. Steve from San Diego. I'm one of Darin's biggest fans. ISO, Industry Organization for Standards. Darin mentioned earlier that America won't be the voice on what AI is or what it does or how it's regulated. So will ISO be that central point? That's the first part of my question.
Want that answered now? Or did you have a part two?
Okay. Part two, will there be at least a few or a couple, hopefully one framework to allow organization to comply, get insurance, all those things, as far as like a contrast to what's going on now where there's almost numerous frameworks that enterprises have to use to maintain their insurance, compliancy, get budgets. It's really a roll of the dice right now. Will they learn from an AI, be more centralized and controlled? Thank you.
Yeah, interesting two-part question. I would say it's hard to tell the outcome of the race. I would say we have a 50-50 shot at sort of driving the conversation. And, you know, some would probably argue that us driving the conversation isn't necessarily the way that it should show up for the rest of the world. Like, who are we to decide? Having been in cybersecurity for nearly 20 years and having China as one of my primary torturers and adversaries, I would say I sort of lean towards a Western U.S. Based approach to how this all works out versus their approach, right? They're already, you know, doing scores about their, you know, citizen scores where they're saying, based on all the information we've gathered about you and whether you've done what the party has asked you to do, you can get on a train and go visit your relatives during the holidays or not. And I think that is one dystopic view of the leverage of AI that I don't favor. And I would say those more closed-minded societies or more restrictive societies, depending on your point of view, is something that's not as interesting to me. I'd love to hear more comments on that. I think from a standpoint of frameworks, the good news is there's always frameworks in everything, right? And John had touched on during our pregame, and I'll let him speak to it, a framework that's been developed around digital twin. I tend to go back always to the NEST framework for maturity. And I think that some of the digital twin frameworks are overlapping well with that because it is based on a maturity concept. So there's even in the last 12 months, there's been a couple of NIST releases about the implementation of AI as it pertains to the maturity frameworks that many of us have been following, you know, a 4 or 5 step process. And John or Eric, maybe you could speak to the frameworks that have developed around digital twin and AI.
Yeah. I think it's a very interesting question, and you can probably tell I don't come from the US. I come from way back east. And in Europe, there is a lot more focus on ISO and on standards. One of the things I've experienced in coming over to the States is nobody really cares about national standards here, because the standards that really matter are the local standards. And the local standards might well be influenced by the county standards or by the state standards, but federal standards don't really come into a lot of things that I experience. There are guidelines there. The other thing in my experience with ISO is they're always about 5 to 7 years too late. So if you wait for a standard, I'm sorry, but you're out of business. The thing that I found in the US rather than in Europe is that there are some absolutely incredible trade bodies if you get involved in them. So I'm personally have been involved in the Digital Twin Consortium. I was co-chair of the AECO group, Architectural Engineering Construction Operations Group, for about 2 years. And we developed a lot of the guidelines that were then further adapted by NIST, which is the National Institute of Building Strategy, I think it is. And they then put a guideline together. But that guideline was put together about 3 years too late, and it's already out of date. So I think for my guidance is it's the large companies that are going to have more to do with setting the standards. And in the world of digital twins, there's very few of them. There's Microsoft, there's Amazon, there's big organizations like Dassault and Siemens, and then there's the gaming engine side, the Unities, Unreals, and NVIDIA. Focus on what they're doing, because any good company is going to push those standards as far as they can without breaking the laws in order to get commercial advantage. So I wouldn't wait for ISO to come up with anything.
I guess a good example of that, and I don't know if it makes me feel better or worse, is how we're managing drone flights. So I guess the FAA has more involvement now, but as drones became more and more popular, it was just kind of a free-for-all.
Yeah, and now we're seeing drones used strategically in warfare, and it's interesting. Like, it's things like war and pornography that always push technology, right? And those aren't necessarily positive influences. They do have a kind of a blowback on technologies that we get to enjoy, right? Like the enhancement of video-based things has definitely been improved through the technologies developed in some of these more cutting-edge driven businesses. And I think you'll see the same thing, occur in this emanation and the application of NVIDIA, who just became the largest company in the world. And there's no surprise there, right? Because they are carrying forward the next iteration of a vision and a technology that exists on, chips that are the size of your head. And it's interesting to see them pushing towards that. And that's really all surrounding this concept of digital twin. Who has a question? Another question here? Oh, yeah, let's recognize, gentleman here. Thanks, Angelo.
I guess it was more of a comment. There already is an ISO 42001 standard that it's to manage the risk of AI. I think the European Union is kind of mandating it now. So if anybody's leading just compliance, I think it's them. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I've always, argued that compliance is anti-cybersecurity because it's about box checking and it's about, making sure that we can minimize the risk of a lawsuit and what bad consequences comes from that. And I think, we'll see the same thing with AI is, we've got to drive this conversation as cybersecurity professionals because we've been through it with compliance. Compliance And privacy started with the CMO or the marketing person, right? You had some talented people coming out of marketing. They're like, hey, let's throw this compliance stuff at that person. And now it's evolved into a bona fide role. I was at RSA, and my friend George Kurtz, who runs CrowdStrike, was saying that CISOs now need to be on the board of directors because the risks that they are mitigating is critical to survival of those companies, right? And so we've gone from marketers to true technologists with board strategy perspectives. And I think we've got to be driving that same thing because what is protection of our people, of our employees, of our colleagues? It's cybersecurity and protecting their identities and protecting their ability to do their work and protecting the power grid, right? Because these are the things that, as cybersecurity professionals, are our deep-seated secrets and concerns, is that the power grid is going to take everything down, right? And we've been talking about that for 20 years now, and we've seen some examples of it with trains being taken offline, power grids being taken offline. These are the bigger pictures that, as cybersecurity experts, we've got to be on the leading edge of protecting. And AI now just becomes another tool set that we need to work with. All right, I'm going to call out the women in the room. I don't think we've had a single question from a powerful woman right here in the back. Thank you. And then we'll get your question next. Thank you. Just your name and your organization.
My name is Gunjan. I work at Medtronic. I'm just curious if any of the panelists can share an example of digital twin modeling initiatives that they've either led or been a part of, and any key insights. As you can imagine, I'm looking for some use cases in the healthcare industry. Any, wins, learnings, anything at all?
I can give you one that we've just been through. It was a hospital which was looking at putting an extra floor on its emergency care. And they had classified their beds in terms of a number of different urgent care or recovery beds or whatever. And they wanted to put together a plan of how they could go through this intermediate state because they wanted to continue using the 2 floors while they're under renovation and while they built the 3rd floor. And so they built out a simulation model, which was the use of digital twin simulation. Another use case was they were looking at the distance that a nurse would walk in an average day. And as you well know, most wards have long corridors and they go from end to end. They said, really, we should build circular wards. So the nurse's station is in the middle and equal distance to all patients. And all of that was done through digital twin simulation.
Another example, one that I read about, not involved in, was depicted in a white paper by Deloitte, and it had to do with the addressing epileptic seizures and the placement of Internet of Thing devices in the brain of people, victims of epilepsy. And I don't know that it was the same technology as a accelerometer, but similar to an accelerometer kind of approach. They were able to simulate different conditions or different causes for the seizure. So,
one of my friends actually has that embedded in their head.
Okay.
And they used to be really flawed with these epileptic seizures.
And they did it using digital twin technology.
Digital twin, and they actually trained the engine in a virtual environment. So they gave him particular scenarios within virtual reality to try and trigger the events so they could then get the brain patterns to recognize these events so they could
avoid them.
Yeah. Yeah, so the training module, which, you think about it, this is as old as the study of all the technologies that have gone into building AI. It's training, right? And this is why we had, even 10 years ago, what I call the infant brain, the infant AI, that we were like, that's really not that impressive. Now we've got this massive computing power. We've got training modules that are being captured, huge islands of data that we gathered during the big data era, and all that's being stuffed into these various AI models. And that's why they're passing us up, you know. Who in the room is ready to have a chip implanted somewhere on their body by a show of hands?
It's already implanted in your hands.
Yeah, you have it, right? Pick up your phone. So I actually would do it. And here's my thinking is, so we're all the smartest person in the room now, right? Why is that? Because we have this mainly, right? And what question could I ask you right now that you wouldn't be able to develop some answer to? And not only could you develop an answer to it, but you might create a white paper or a slide deck, right? I've been fascinated, for those who haven't seen it yet, Manus, great AI tool. It's the next generation of AI workflow that comes from our queries and our prompts. And by the way, slowest part of the whole AI system now is our ability to prompt the system. You know, like I could spend an hour building a prompt, and then the AI takes 10 minutes to develop a whole set of documents and everything that I've asked for. I think that we'll all take a chip in our head or our hand. Probably won't even be something we could see with our human eye. It'll be so small that we won't even notice it. And whether it's us or our children, we'll all do it because it will keep us on par with our peers. Because imagine the three of us are in a room, and let's say that John and Eric have a chip, and they're able to access by prompting faster than I can by typing on my phone or speaking to it. It's just they're thinking it. It'd be like an infant talking to two adults, like a baby who has limited language skills and ability to quickly respond and reason, to two people who have all the information that they need to have a conversation. So they're talking here, and I'm like at a level, and that's why I think we'll be driven towards this idea to enhance our access to the information. Like we have all the access to the information now, but it's kind of slow, actually. Yeah. It turns out slow compared to what I just thought about John right now, right? So imagine that chip could speed up that process. Would you take it?
No ethical considerations there, huh?
I don't know. The ethical are absolutely terrifying, right? Like whether it's Elon Musk or, you know, the Chinese government or, you know, they are deep, dark, challenging ethical questions. But what has that ever prevented you from clicking the privacy box, which you did not read? Right? So that's what I'm talking about here. That is that. So understand as you're guiding yourselves or your children or your colleagues or your employees, like that's the world that we're living in, right? We've already built the model. Click the privacy box to give away all my privacy. Here.
Hi again, Ian with Torrance Memorial. So we've seen from every single panelist here, as well as yourselves, promote AI as the ability to reduce cost and create efficiency. We've also heard you speak directly about the use of and business choice, that decision for enhanced productivity over respecting the privacy of the individuals and their data. So, now that we're completely disregarding the privacy button, as you just pointed out, can you give us some examples of risk mitigation options for deliberately choosing unethical business models by using AI?
I think we need to have an attorney up here to define what an unethical business model is, because look at your employment contracts. They say that whatever you do within your organization, the organization owns the data, you don't own it. So what is private data anymore? If you're doing it within a business, it's no longer private data, it's business data. And if you're applying AI correctly, you're trying to make that employee more efficient and keep them employed. You're not trying to put them out of a job. So agentic AI is really all about getting the maximum performance out of a person. I'll give you a direct example of that recently from a construction project. If anyone's read deep specifications, and you mentioned ISO specifications. Well, building specifications are even worse. They can be hundreds of pages long, and nobody can understand every aspect of it, except an agent can. And an agent can respond to a query, respond to a specification, and give you the right answer probably 9 times out of 10. You never get that from a person, but the person who uses that agent is going to be employed more than the person who's not using that agent.
If the person that you have can't understand the documentation that's provided by the AI, then you have your own AI risk acceptance.
Yeah.
And we've chosen and seen already that AI risk acceptance by using AI is therefore unethical risk acceptance.
I would say
as a business, you're accepting deliberately acting in an unethical manner.
I wouldn't call it unethical. I would say it's not, you're not being sensible if you take the answer of an agent as being absolutely factually correct.
And yet that's exactly what we've been promoting here already.
Well, that's not something I would ever promote, because we always put the verification. In fact, one of the training examples or the training rules, the guide rails we put in our agents is do not give an answer if there is no data on which to base that answer. And that is a hard and fast rule.
Because the AI is always going to give you an answer generally,
Yeah.
unless you tell it not to, right? Because it's just the smartest person in the room, so it wants to say something.
It's like a dog. It wants to make you happy.
Yeah, I think, again, I certainly am not promoting anything unethical. I would just observe, as I did, that privacy has been dead for a long time, and we've all been complicit with that. Probably we need to talk about what privacy is in the modern world and maybe make some adjustments on that and have a dialogue and a conversation about it. Because it's not what I remember. We used to talk about compliance and, here's the 10 things we need to do to cyber secure our space. And then there was a privacy component that mirrored that, which never actually happened. It was a concept that actually never came into being, from what I can see, and from my own choices to collect every privacy thing to give away my privacy.
Yeah.
So that's a choice that we'll continue to make. And by the way, the AI is not going to come in and hard sell you on anything, right? This is its secret power, is it's going to come in with a smooth sales approach.
It already does.
Thank you. Well,
It already does through advertising.
Absolutely.
Through every single interaction that we do when we're doing browser fingerprinting.
Totally understand.
We're going through and every single interaction we see.
Totally understand.
Right in there.
And you have the right to turn that browser off, like you don't have to just turn off the phone, right? But that's the trick.
We're going to have to wrap up with the
Yep.
questions, but we can continue this on the panel later today.
Yeah, so just a 30-second wrap-up by each of the panelists, and thank you for being here. And a big round of applause for you for joining the conversation. Appreciate it. John, last parting thoughts.
We're going into a completely new world. There are no rules. We're going to have to come up with the rules. And as soon as we've got the rules, somebody's going to break them.
Chris, Eric?
Yeah, I think John says it for me. I agree with that.
I would say the future is bright and sunny. And that is that way because we're going to make it that way. And the hard jobs that you do every day to make sure that people are safe, that they can sleep well at night, that their power supply works. I remember touring a electrical facility when I was a young person doing a book report, I think for 7th or 8th grade. And the gentleman told me, he said, people are children of light. When they flip on the switch, they expect light. And that is all of our expectation about everything. We expect privacy, we expect light, we expect a lot of things. But it's up to us to bring together the consensus discussion after debate and an exchange of ideas to make that a reality. So thank you all for being here. Thank you, FutureCon.
Darin, the first question you asked that I don't think anyone raised their hand, what was it? You asked how many IT people were in the room?
Oh, I was trying to get a breakdown of who was more focused on the technical versus business.
Well, I've seen everyone's title in here, and I think 80% of the room should have raised their hand.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
Yeah, I think
it was
three
about 50%.
people raised their hands.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, it's that warm-up question is always awkward.
But you
so.
guys, we appreciate your involvement, and we appreciate all the hard work you do in here.
Absolutely.
So thank you to
Thank you.
Darin
Thank you.
and our panelists here. Thank you all for being here. We are going to take a 30-minute break, and when you come back, we're going to do